Three things that a man will do when he has anxiety that we would never expect from traditional anxiety. So, when it comes to male mental health, typically the symptoms present so much different than what we stereotypically think of as symptoms of something like anxiety. So, a lot of our symptoms that we think of for most disorders are more female symptoms, and men just don't present with those symptoms. And so, a lot of times, male anxiety is just missed. So, if you have male anxiety or you know someone that has male anxiety, there's typically three things that are going to happen. And I actually have another video on some of the other symptoms that you can check out. But these three things is that there's going to be overworking and or risk taking. So the overworking is a very culturally accepted coping mechanism that most men have, in which they can kind of escape some of the bad feeling, the anxious thought through working. And working is praised in our culture, so it's like kind of a win-win. The problem is that this is a coping mechanism that doesn't lead to a solution. So it doesn't address the root cause, therefore it doesn't actually fix the problem. And additionally, there is also a risk-taking element. So a lot of times men will engage in risk-taking as a escape valve to their anxiety. So they'll feel anxious, and then they'll have this like adrenaline rush from their risk-taking that will relieve the anxiety. Again, a coping mechanism that does work, but it doesn't address the root cause. Additionally, men will typically try to avoid getting treatment or avoid speaking about this issue because most men are culturally conditioned to not talk about these issues, and it would be harmful to them to consider themselves as someone who's anxious. And so they typically don't want to talk about these issues, about emotions, about this type of anxiety, because for them that would be weakness. And all of us, in order to maintain mental health, we need to think of ourselves as able and good and functional and kind of contributing to the society. And if they were to think of themselves as weak, it would not allow them to think that way. So it's actually extremely harmful. And the third variable that we see in male anxiety is that typically there's a huge social withdrawal element. So a lot of men who suffer anxiety will withdraw socially, and there's actually a really good reason for this. And that's because, again, men are culturally conditioned to not display weakness. And so they need to remain kind of powerful and not rely on others. And so when they feel weak, they want to withdraw because that's kind of the only way they know to kind of process that weakness. And so a lot of times when men feel anxious, they will withdraw. They'll stop answering messages. They'll stop showing up to things. They want to kind of almost be like how sometimes like an animal gets injured and then they kind of go in their cave and heal by themselves. It's kind of like that. It's a similar type of behavior, because if they were to be healing in like a group setting in relationships, it would feel overly vulnerable to them. And even though potentially it could be really helpful to heal in a relationship and to kind of try to help this in a relationship, it's just typically just too painful for most men. And so that's why you see a lot of social withdrawal from usually relationships when males are anxious. So if your partner is going through something like this, it has nothing to do with you. It's just that men are kind of set up in this kind of lose-lose situation where it's like, oh, you need to be super strong and not show any emotions. That's how they're culturally conditioned. But at the same time, now you need to communicate with your partner and be vulnerable. So it's like it's just so difficult to navigate for a lot of men these days because it's obviously like an opposing ask. So it's like, how do I do that? Because it seems like it's a game I can't win. So yeah, if you're exhibiting some of these symptoms or if one of your loved ones is, it might be helpful to look into male anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder because there's so many treatments for anxiety and it's a very treatable disorder. And so there is definitely help out there and there's a lot of hope. So hopefully this brings a lot of awareness to the topic.